Hi, this is Paul from Pear Tree Education. Today's video is about student-centered learning. Like many aspects of 21st century learning, student-centered learning is fairly misunderstood. To judge whether a class is student-centered, you first and foremost have to ask yourself who's doing all the work in the classroom, the teacher or the student. If it's the teacher, then the class is teacher-centered. While the content of the class is extremely important to student-centered learning in that if the content is relevant to the students' lives, that makes it student-centered. The problem is, if it's all about the teacher doing all the talking and basically imposing ideas upon the students, then it's definitely not student-centered learning. In fact, in the student-centered classroom, the teacher has very little airtime. How many teachers out there have you seen that basically feed off their students, hanging on and listening attentively to their every word? While it's fantastic for students to admire their teachers, ultimately student-centered learning is about the students doing all of the work. After all, learning is about doing, so in order for your students to learn, they have to be doing the work, not the teacher. We need to get away from this teacher telling the kids just how things are or imposing their views upon the students and allowing the students to basically have the freedom to discover things for themselves. In a nutshell, project-based learning is the best way to implement student-centered learning because the students are in control of the project. And I'm going to come back to that later on. But firstly, just to kind of indicate, what are the signs of a teacher-centered class? Well, as I've said, in a teacher-centered class, the teacher's doing all of the work, they're doing all of the talking. Even if the students say something, the teacher will frequently interrupt the student or finish what they're saying, or perhaps even correct their point of view and actually point out where that student's wrong, because those views conflict with the teacher's own. The teacher may give good marks on papers where the students are agreeing with what the teacher believes, and bad marks to students that have an opposing view to the teacher, regardless of the quality of the writing. Ultimately, it's quite hard to avoid teacher-centered classes because it's human nature to teach what you believe to be important. And as a result, classes are highly politicized. They will contain information that essentially imposes views upon the students about what is right and what is wrong, what is important, what's not important. And so you can't sanitize a class, you can't eliminate that because everything is politicized. But at the same time, you can't be a hypocrite. You can't ask your students to be open-minded when you yourself are highly judgmental. You have to give room in your class for students to have views that oppose yours. So if students are doing all of the work and they're working in groups on projects, what are the things that they could be carrying out that they wouldn't ordinarily in a teacher-centered class? Well, firstly, there's clearly more student talking time. The communication process is highly complex because they're working in pairs, they're working in groups, they're communicating verbally and in written form. They give presentations, so there's a public speaking element to the class. They're doing peer teaching or even teaching a whole class. They have to defend an opinion because that opinion is going to differ from other people. They may have to negotiate because they're working in groups, and when you're coming up with a group idea, you have to be able to make compromises and also defend your position when you believe so strongly that something should be included or things should be done a certain way. There's a huge element of researching involved. Rather than the teacher presenting you with all the facts, you have to be the one that goes out and finds those facts. Then you have to sort through them, use critical thinking to decide what facts are accurate, which facts are inaccurate or biased. You have to be able to amalgamate that data. You have to be able to form informed opinions based on the data that you've found. All of the researching, communicating online, and using computers for presentations and for your papers, these are developing computer skills that perhaps you wouldn't ordinarily have had so much use for. There's clearly a huge amount of teamwork involved when you're working on group projects. There's problem solving, there's organization and planning involved. You don't just go ahead and do the project. You have to essentially organize your team, who's going to play what role, and also what are the stages of the project that you're going to go through and what are the timings for those projects. So there's time management involved as well. I mentioned on a previous video about student collaboration, how in, for example, lit circle classes, students play different roles. And this is no different from any classroom. The roles may change somewhat depending on what the content of the class is. So in a lit circle class, you can have things like character captains and culture connectors, where that wouldn't be very relevant in other classes. So essentially you have these roles that maybe set roles that the teacher has already created, or the students may just invent roles themselves based on the need of the group. The greatest thing about student-centered learning is that students have the chance to learn by doing, and more than this, they have the chance to learn by making mistakes. They're not given facts. They're not being told, this is how it is, now write about that. They basically have to go out there and find out for themselves. They have to create projects that may ultimately be failures, but they learn by going through that process. They learn by making mistakes in their groups on how not to work in a team, and then find out, well, we shouldn't have done that. You have to go through that kind of evaluation process of self-evaluation at the end of every project. Now, of course, we can't escape the fact that the teacher's in the room. The teacher's role, as I've mentioned on other videos, is there to act as a mentor. There is obviously instructional work that needs to be done by a teacher. It just shouldn't take up entire classes for week upon week. The teacher's there essentially to present the minimal information just to get the students to understand something and then get them working, get them doing something. And so much of what teachers do at the moment in the classroom could be done by the students. It's just that the teachers just can't let go of control. They feel like they have to be constantly at the front of the class. Even when the students are at the front of the class, the teacher's up there with them. Why? The teachers shouldn't be anywhere near them, because essentially they're sharing the limelight that the students should be receiving. It's almost like the students don't belong at the front of the class, that's the teacher's position, which is complete nonsense. In my classes, I make a point of actually sitting down with the rest of the students while the other students are up there presenting, because I'm not more important than the students are. If someone's up in the front of the class, I'm just going to sit down with the rest of my students, and that's where I belong, because I'm a member of the audience. Our jobs as teachers are to observe our students, watch how they interact, watch how they carry out research, watch how they organize and plan their projects, how they organize their teams, and look for weaknesses in those things. Look for strengths in members of the team who are able to carry out those things of basically delegating to people, leading the group, and also bringing out the best in others, and then point that out to them and the rest of the students that that person has that ability. But then teach the other students how to do that. Or better still, get the person that's good at it to teach their peers. Now, coming from a British background myself, I know how begrudged other students would be by this right now. The idea that someone from their peer group has the nerve to tell them how to do things. But this is the thing of our culture that we have to change. We have to be able to let go of our pride and to be able to accept the abilities of other people in order to learn, in order to better ourselves. We're all too ready to look up to adults and adore them and essentially worship the ground they walk on and listen to their every word as if it's God's law. But then our classmates may say something actually more accurate than the teacher does, and we just dismiss their point of view because we don't believe that they can be any better than we can. I've seen this time and again in ESL classes where people younger than them or of the same age or of a different gender, and they'll just dismiss what they have to say. I'll ask them to work with that person and they'll just look at me and just carry on working independently because they have no respect for their peers. And this is the thing I'm working on. I'm just thinking to myself, well, I don't care how good your work is. If you're incapable of working with another human being, that's the thing that's going to affect you in life. And that's the thing I'm going to be working on. I may be here to teach you a subject, but that's not all I'm here for. I'm here to teach you life skills. I'm here to teach you social skills. I'm here to teach you how to be successful in life. And it certainly isn't about being independent or being disrespectful to other people. Student-centered learning is by no means a new topic. It's been around for decades, just this whole concept. And yet, when you look at the average classroom, this is just not taking place, mostly because of the way the curriculum is designed, but also just because teachers were educated in a teacher-centered classroom, and this just perpetuates the problem that you end up teaching exactly like you were taught. At some point, this has to change. Some teachers that are currently teacher-centered have to reflect on this and just let go of control. They have to give control over to the students, give them the airtime, set them challenges at the beginning of the class and just let them get on with it. Don't interfere, apart from when things are absolutely out of control. But a little bit of chaos in the classroom is actually a good thing. A lot can be learned from making those mistakes, from arguments, from people disagreeing with each other, from people just blatantly making mistakes, just going about things the wrong way. They will learn from making those mistakes, and if they don't, after they've finished, then you can get them to reflect on that and then perhaps guide them on that. That's your job as a teacher, to be a mentor. To finish, I'd like to give you an example of a really bad class, one that is extremely student-centered. After 10 or 20 minutes of explaining the topic and giving multiple examples, she finally said, "Okay guys, now try this example, see how you get on." 5 seconds pass. "Okay, here's the answer. Now don't look if you don't want to see how it's done. If you haven't finished, you can just look away." but let me explain how it's done. It's done like this, blah 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 blah. Okay, here's another example, try this one. 5 seconds pass. Okay, here's the answer. Oh, let me explain to you how it's done. If you haven't finished, don't listen, but I'm going to explain to you. The teacher just can't contain herself. She cannot possibly stay quiet for more than 5 seconds without needing to basically explain to the class the answer. In such a learning environment, there is no learning going on because the teacher's doing all of the work, has all of the airtime, and the students don't even have the opportunity to try. Can you imagine how infuriating it is for the student not to be given the chance to even try to answer the question? They're not given the opportunity to work together, so there's no collaboration going on at all. And worse than that, even if they had the right answer, they're not allowed to come up to the board and actually give the answer and then explain how it's done. Every single answer is done by the teacher, which is just ludicrous. There is no learning there. So to wrap up, I'd like to leave you with this lasting thought. The teacher may be able to teach great, but he or she isn't a great teacher.